Some decisions pay you fast. Other decisions protect your future. Mike Barefoot served more than 27 years in staffing, placing over 1,000 professionals, and learned something most people never get to see: the real cost of a yes. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Sangal. I am a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career, because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The longer we live out of alignment with who we are, what we do best, and why we are here, the more we miss out, and the more the world misses out on what only we can give. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you will hear stories from people who have navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can create a life-first career and become your own version of authentic success, one that is aligned, meaningful, and truly yours. My guest today is Mike Barefoot. Mike is a longtime staffing and recruiting leader turned speaker who helps professionals and organizations grow with clarity, discipline, and purpose. After over 27 years in the staffing industry, including building over $50 million in revenue and placing more than 1,000 professionals, primarily in IT, Mike now shares real-world lessons from the hiring side of the table: judgment, integrity, and long-term thinking. He's also been recognized with top performance honors, featured over 50 times as an industry expert and entrepreneur, and he brings decades of martial arts discipline into everything he teaches, including 37 years of training and multiple black belts. Mike's story has a pattern: adapt, commit, repeat. His story includes family change, adapting fast, learning discipline through repetition, and it shaped how he made decisions later: when to walk away, when to hold the line, and how to choose integrity over impulse. Basketball became his reset button, working the same motions again and again. Later, when that chapter ended, he found the same structure in martial arts. That repetition shaped the way he moved through career decisions too: how he built successes, how he handled pressure, why he turned down paths that looked impressive, and why he cared more about outcomes than quick wins. This conversation is about hiring decisions, yes. It's also about the personal formation behind those decisions: discipline, integrity, and playing the long game. In this episode, you'll hear what over 27 years in staffing taught him about people, judgment, and consequences, why he turned down promotions, turned down fees, and chose autonomy over approval, how his definition of success evolved from performance and recognition to relationships, health, and peace, and why integrity became a business strategy and a personal standard. Welcome, Mike Barefoot, to Your Next Success. I'm super looking forward to this conversation today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's we've gotten to know each other over the last month or so, and it's a really good honor, and I've just enjoyed the conversations we've had. So it's not a big stretch for me, and I really appreciate you giving me a platform.
Absolutely. Let's put this conversation out to the world. And yeah, Mike and I, we got to meet at a National Speaker Association North Carolina chapter meeting. They have in-person meetups near RTP in North Carolina every second Saturday of the month. So it was awesome to meet you there, and then to realize we've had a little bit of similarity in the kind of
A lot of
things that we've worked
similarities if
on.
you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and this new world of both of us, as we'll get into, both of us had some similarities in a bit of the things we focused on in our career, and now we're wanting to make even bigger impact and really help on a larger scale. So podcasts are helping to do that. Speaking is helping to do that. And so I'm happy to do what I can so we can help each other and really just get the word out there so people start to love their lives, love the things that they can do, and utilize the things that we've both done in our careers for their benefit.
Absolutely. I think us being both philanthropic and altruistic in terms of our approaches, I think when you give more, you receive more. And when you're
Yes.
open to ideas, you receive more ideas. So we've been pinging stuff and spitballing ideas off each other from different approaches. And I've really thought about things I'd not thought about before. So I think it goes even beyond what I've done. It's going into where I want to go. And we're both giving approaches and ideas. And the more you're open to hearing other people, the more your world expands, I believe, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to back in the day. Tell us about, where were you born? Where did you grow up? What were the beginning years of your life like?
Geez. I was born in Fayetteville. My dad was from a rural area named Dunn, North Carolina, which is in between Raleigh and Fayetteville. It's exactly almost the halfway mark. He met my mom in Fayetteville. He served in the Army and was when they had a draft and went to Vietnam. And I was what you would call a war baby because when he got back, I was born exactly 9 months later. So uh, then he realized I don't really want to live in Fayetteville because it's a military town, and if you're there for the military, it's great, and if you're not trying to make a career out of the military, there's not as many opportunities. So he convinced my mom to go to Raleigh, or more specifically the Garner area, which is a suburb of Raleigh, and they were married till I was about 9, and then they split up, and it's that age where you're not old enough to really look after yourself after school, and he was the one that was I was staying with. So my aunt and uncle jumped in and said, "Hey, you guys can stay with us, and we'll kind of provide that influence when you're not here." He was still working in Raleigh, and so I moved to Dunn and was there from the age of 9 till I was 14. So basically, almost 6 years. Then I went to live with my mom for a year back in Fayetteville, but again, it was a military town, so it wasn't what I was used to. Decided to go back and live with my dad. Finished high school there. Went to NC State for undergrad. Got a degree in business management. um, when I graduated, it was the worst year in 25 years for college grads to um, get a job. So my high school coach was a assistant coach at Campbell University, and we were close at the time. And said, "Why don't you use this downtime and enhance your resume or your background and go get an MBA?" So I did that, and 6 months to the month of me graduating, I started in staffing, and did that for 27 years basically. First 12 years, I worked for three different companies, some of the biggest or largest staffing firms in the world, specializing. What I did was IT staff. We talked about, you had a background in staffing as well, and that's one of our similarities we were talking about earlier. And I did that for 12 years, and um, won a lot of performance recognitions like Rookie of the Year, Multiple Performers of the Year, President's Club wins, and they wanted me to manage, but I knew the jockey always makes more money than the horse. And if I was going to be both, meaning I was going to be the general manager and I saw it was somewhat or semi feasible if you're a recruiter and you're based out of the office. But if you're an account executive and have to be out all the time, and then they want you to do Excel spreadsheets, weekly conference calls with the other GMs and the VP in your region, monthly one-on-ones, hosting the executive VP every 6 weeks, and make sure he's happy for the 3 days he's in your off, all that stuff, and then still maintain your sales. Well, when you don't maintain those sales and you're the main one driving the revenue, and they say, well, the revenue's dropped off by $1 million in the last year since Mike took over. The executive VP ain't going to say, well, there's only so many hours a day. You're going to have to fall on your own sword, is what I figured. So it gave me the idea, or was derivative to me, instead of making a good income, and I have pretty big hands, but you have a lot of the sand, or in that, for from a analytical standpoint, the sand represented money. Instead of having money flowing through my fingers, I decided I wanted all the money, all the autonomy, the potential or prospect for equity in a building if I eventually bought one, which I did. I took it, and for a little over 15 years I started my own boutique IT staffing firm, and we were profitable all 15 plus years. And then had some things happen, lost an operations director through unexpected sickness that took him from us, and had some other life changing events. and was at a good point in my life and my career where I had the autonomy to make some changes and some decisions where it was more about me. And I was at that point where I paid for a kid to go through school and to get grown, and I'd put him through college. And it's ironic because now he's pursuing his MBA and wants to go into a sales career. It's funny how the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so, but now I'm wanting to like give back like you are. And the message that both of us we were talking about the other day, the three biggest decisions that you make in your life are typically who your significant other is going to be, that your house is going to be probably the largest purchase you make, and what you're going to do for a career, all tied into staffing. And I wanted to get more into the speaking and coaching because I'd already done that with like the MBA class out at state for 3 years, and had done thousands of presentations to managers, and dealt with candidates and walked them into interviews. And I was like, it's not that much of a difference from what I was doing then and placing individuals. Now I have the opportunity, I can do it without the monthly guillotine hanging over my head, like making a payment for this or make. And I said, well, why not do it more for purposes to feel like I'm even more so. I was giving back then, but I wanted to give back more. And so that's kind of how I ended up where we're talking, and trying to do what I'm doing and try to do what you're doing as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I want to get a little bit deeper into some of those parts because even though you did a beautiful job of summarizing that in just a couple minutes, there's also some other parts that I think people don't pay attention to. They don't realize, or they think it's just like as a child, it's just child's play. But I'm curious, as a child in some of those youngest years, what did you love doing for fun? And were there any particular school related subjects that you liked more than others? Because I believe that we've been given clues all along of who we are and the kind of things that we love doing. And yes, there's time, effort, and energy involved, but it's like invigorating. And there's
Yes.
other things that there's time, effort, and energy, and you can do it, and you can even do it really, really well, but you might not love it. So I'm just curious, like, let's say, the littlest, youngest Mike, as you were growing up, in between mom and dad and all that. But like you mentioned something about a coach, so it seems like maybe sports was involved. But
Was,
what
yeah,
did you
yeah.
do in your for fun as a child? What kind of things did you love doing, not love doing? And then school related, were there any particular kind of subjects you enjoyed more than others?
Um, those are great I've not been asked. I've been on multiple podcasts. Those are both questions that I've not been asked that I really like, because I think when you peel back the onion, you want to find out what's at the core.
Yep.
And the core is what develops who you become later. And my parents, like I said, they split when I was 9, and I was a little bit without an anchor because you're at that pivotal, and we didn't have therapy and things that we do now. And my stepfather, who was married to my mom, was coaching church league basketball, and I don't know why. I have a cousin that played basketball at state, and his jersey's up in the rafters at their arena, and I'm predisposed. He was 6'6", I'm 6'5". I'm 6'8". We know the my son's not the mailman's kid, so obviously it's genetics. But I wasn't very good at it, but I went to a practice when I was 11, and somehow basketball, I don't know if it was the DNA or what, that hit home, and I started wanting to get more into it. And then I found myself playing all the time, 2, 3, 4 hours in a day. And I think back on it now introspectively, and I think the basketball, because there'd be a lot of times when there was nobody but me on a court, and I had a little racket work, that little side hustle. Um, my court at home was terrible. So we had a neighborhood right behind my home, and moms are great because the dads aren't going to be as giving as the moms, but I would knock on the door and say, "Hey, can I use your basketball goal?" There'd be no car parked there. And I had about 3 or 4 houses in the neighborhood that I would shift between. That way I didn't wear out my welcome. But then the dad would be coming home at 5:30 and see me like twice in a week there and look at me like, does this kid ever go home? So I realized now when I was there, playing after school, maybe 3:30 or 4, and then stay until 6 or 6:30 or whatever the time may have been. I realize now that was cathartic. It was kind of like my own little lab or therapy where I thought I was really working on my jump shot. It was really giving me time to think and work out
Yeah.
issues and problems and kind of maybe microcosmically isolate where I was working on certain personal issues that you really did, we didn't talk about things the way we do now. And so I look at it, it was cathartic and it was therapy. And I realize that now. And going back to your other question, what was my favorite subject? And definitively, that was history. And I find
Really? That's
myself,
cool.
yeah, and I would look around and I would look around in history class at different phases of my educational career, whether it would have been high school, elementary, even going up to college. And I would look around at other people that were in class, and I don't know if you've ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where they're zoned out, and they keep saying Bueller,
Yeah.
Bueller, and you'd see kids like, with their heads down and half awake or not. And I really was drawn to stuff because the definition of insanity is if you don't learn from past mistakes, uh, you tend to repeat them over and over, and that's kind of the loose definition of insanity. So I would look at what had happened in other centuries or other time periods, and then you get to a granular level and you pare it down to how that fits into your life, and you go, well, how does this work with if I did this, or if it didn't work for this country or this economy in a certain time period, how would I use this personally to make me not make those mistakes that that country or that economy did? So I was really drawn towards history would be, and a lot of times for those, because I could personalize it.
Yeah.
And, where people sometimes are driven towards science, which was obviously not me. And, they say you have your left brain and your right brain. And we've both been in sales. So communications always has been a real love of mine, communicating with people and the interaction. But then you tie into history with that. And then, as we had talked about with placing people in jobs, you find out from previous people that you've placed, you go, oh, you remind me of Bob X. And this is the same issue he had. And then you see how the
Yeah.
history of it ties back in. And I feel like I should be reclining and I should be paying you for this because this may be therapy. But um, that's where I
I do
got.
get that a lot, and I'm a doctor without any patience
Yeah, yeah,
on both ways.
so you're Freud or Bob Newhart here. So no, I think it did, and I think that's an extension of where I've been all three levels in staffing. Whether it be a full desk, which was perm, a recruiter, and an account executive before I owned a company. So that gave me great, background for owning a company. But I think when you hit that ceiling, you've done everything. I want to take a step further and maybe help people out even more from,
Yeah.
like I said, without monetizing it and saying, well, I get a fee if I place this person, or I get, you can't help but have selfish reasons when there's
I
money
get it,
tied up.
yes.
Yeah. So this takes a lot of that out of the equation, and you go, hey, it's great to do this for just the reason of giving back because I've had at least 1,000 people that I've placed in my career and generate X amount of revenue and done it. But now you get to do it without the money aspect weighing you down and being like a swinging guillotine over your head. You just do it because you want to give back, you
That's
know?
right. Yeah, because even when I was trying to think about, like, what do I really wanna do, um,
You grow up,
after I decided to choose myself and
yeah.
uh leave my very well-paying, recruitment role, and at first I thought, "Oh, I'm gonna ride out my non-compete, and then I'm gonna go back and get all my clients and stick it to the man," and I was like, "Mm," like, it just didn't have the right ring to it, and then I had to kinda
Yeah.
think back. It's like, what did I really love? I really loved talking to somebody in a moment of questioning, in a moment of uncertainty, and helping them see how awesome that they were and open up to new possibilities and coach them through that. And there were many times, I'm sure you had this too, that, in recruiting, it became very evident sometimes that I was on a call with somebody, and while I thought I was talking to them about a job opportunity, I got to learn about somebody in their family that just went to the hospital, somebody that was just got a different diagnosis.
Mhm.
So many things. You become a bit of a life coach while you are a recruiter,
Oh,
and
absolutely, absolutely.
you just help people through that moment. And so that's what I chose to be like, let's just do the right thing and help people. And I love that. Now I want to bring it back to this basketball, this repetition of
Yeah.
practice, practice, practice at
Hmm.
various different places, and how you
Yes.
loved that cathartic nature. And it also made me think like, and then even the history, and to be successful as a anything staffing, recruiting related, you have to get to know what are the best practices, what are the ways that things are done, and you just
Mhm.
have to keep hitting it and just, getting whatever metrics you had. And so even in your youngest time, and you thinking you're just playing basketball, and you're setting yourself up for repetition of
Yes.
tasks that you're enjoying that then did lead to your future success. And I've heard you talk about in some of our conversations about you being in martial arts
Mhm.
and Hall of Fame for some of the things. And I'm curious at what age, because that's a lot of repetition, but at
Oh
what
yeah.
age for success and practice again and again and get back up and keep going and do the form, and just so that you're just doing it. You're just doing the right things. But like, when did martial arts become a part of your life? Tell us that.
It's interesting. So I haven't been designated or defined as ADD or ADHD, but most executives, and this is a little known fact, most executives are ADD. It used to be a cool term to say I multitask, and that's not as in anymore. We just, so I always tell people I handle one problem at a time, I only touch it one time, and then I get to the next thing. So I'm very regimented. It's very good if I stay on a schedule and I do what I'm supposed to do, and say what you do what you say. So I was kind of rudderless because from the age of 11 till I was 21, I played basketball. So I wasn't exactly a Rhodes Scholar. Let me put it that way. I wasn't the most fundamental. My son is much better, and I think he's learned from my mistakes. And I think that's one of the things you give out is where you've hit potholes or minefields, and you go, don't do that. Stay away from this. So I think I've led some people in directions that way, especially at home. But I was kind of one of my better friends at 21 because for 6 months he'd gotten me into lifting weights, and because I'm 6'5", so I was 150 pounds at that. Supermodels would have been jealous of me if, as far as weight at that age. But I my buddy said, "Hey, at 19, you need to start lifting weights." And he had a weird way of getting me the point across. He'd shake my hand and take me to the ground. And go, please let me go. And so I started doing that. And so that was going for 2 years, but you only do that for 3, 4 days a week. So you have all this idle time in between. So he came to me randomly one day, and I think he saw that I was kind of rudderless or without direction because I was so used to in the afternoons playing basketball. And I had worked out. So I took my PE class when I first got to state, and my PE teacher, we took half a semester of basketball and half a semester of bowling. I said this will be an
Okay.
easy way to get an A, and I'll get my PE requirement in. So
Let pause
our
1 second on that. Let me tell you my bowling story just real quick, because
okay,
it
go ahead.
before
Yeah, sure, sure.
I had to take PE, right, also, and I thought, "Okay, I'm gonna take bowling. How hard can this be?" But let
Yeah,
me tell you what happened on the final, right? And it was early. It was like an 8 a.m. class or something. I had to walk across campus. And
yeah,
I'm not a bowler, okay? And I was that nerd. I was the nerd. Give me the nerd
right,
thing to do. And like
right.
water skiing, roller coasters, those things are fun for me. But actual like real ass sports, like I'm the one that like freezes when the ball comes, right? Like I
Right,
mean, well,
right.
I can do a mean game of like pig or horse or whatever the case may be. I can try that, but beyond that, I'm just not my it's not my thing. Anyway, so I'm take bowling because I thought that'll be easy. And I hate to admit this because my kids make fun of me. Um, the final, there was a final for bowling, and it was a paper test. We didn't have any paper tests the whole freaking time. And the first question wanted you to number the pins. And I still don't know which way the pins are supposed to be numbered, but all I know is I failed that frickin' final and I ended up with a C in bowling. Here I am, high school valedictorian, most likely to succeed, scholarship, fellowship, and
Right.
I got a C in bowling, Mike. Like, what the hell? Anyway,
That is
sorry,
that's
but
that's a great you think about it, it's a great coffee table conversation when you're at a dinner party. You go, hey, I was this, and this, but I made a C in bowling. So, so,
you
so the
know,
thing about
yeah, and which
so
I
what
don't know. Like, is it number one is the first pin, or like number one is like the back? I don't know
I think
which
it's
way. I
one
still
is
don't
the first thing that's like 2, 3, and then I think it's 4, 5, 6, and then it
see.
it
I
goes
did it
so
the other way. I think I went
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah.
My
So
bad. Don't do that,
you're
everybody. Don't do
still
that. Listen to
dyslexic
Mike
when
for
it
your
comes to
bowling
bowling.
tips.
No, that's fine. So with me, so I didn't realize our teacher was named Dr. Brown. And you called him Dr. Brown. He made sure you knew he was a doctor. I don't know what it was in, but it was
Bowling?
yeah, yeah, it's no, he was basketball. He was for basketball.
Okay.
So so I had talked to a couple of schools, small colleges about playing basketball when I was coming out of high school. And I love playing. And my dad said, "Why would you go get a degree at a smaller college when you can go to NC State and it's going to have so much more name recognition?" And I said, "Oh, okay." So I opted to do that. And so I took the basketball on the first day of class. I was the tallest kid in class. And I remember thinking, this is going to be an easy. We're just going to play a little pickup here. We're going to, kill. And he was treating it like trying out for a major team. We were doing figure eight drills. If anybody knows basketball, we were, doing layup lines. We're doing, passing drills, all this stuff. And he's yelling at people about not enough follow through on the jump shot, or you went off the wrong foot on a layup. And I was like, wow, what have I stepped into? So he's yelling at people. And then finally, I think I'm doing everything okay. And he calls me over and says, "What's your name?" And I told him, Mike Barefoot. And he said, "Have you ever thought about playing basketball here at State?" And obviously, anybody that's grown up in this area that plays basketball, that with the ACC being so big, you think about that. But I didn't tell him, "Hey, I've got a cousin who's, jerseys in the rafters," and I'd never met him at that time, my cousin. But he said, "Well, hey, I'm with the team. I'm an academic advisor, but I've been a coach at several HBCU colleges, which is historically black colleges and universities. And I think you could help us out. And I want you to go." At the time, the coach was Valvano. And he said, "I want you to go see Coach V." And he stayed on me, perpetually, almost every class until I did go across the street to the Case Center and went up to the third floor. I didn't think it would be this easy. You go to the secretary, and she'd been secretary for several different coaches over the years, even after Valvano had left. And I went in, and this is the age of the typewriter. So he's sitting sideways on a typewriter, and I'd done my homework before I went in there. This is the sales part of me coming out, and I knew he was a walk on at Rutgers. So she said, when I walked up there, she went into his office, said, "Coach V is ready for you now." And I went in, he turned around, he said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about being a walk-on at, here at State." And he said, "We don't have walk-ons." And so I said, "Weren't you a walk-on for Bill Foster at Rutgers?" He said, "Different era." Turned around, went typing again. I said, "Okay." I did what Coach Dr. Brown asked me to do. Saw him the next class. He asked me if I'd done it. I told him what happened. He said, "And you stopped there?" And I said, "Well, I did what you asked me to do." I mean, I really wasn't that,
Yeah.
motivated. And so, um, fast forward for 2 years, or through my junior year, into my junior year, he stayed on me to do it. Valvano got elevated to AD, moved up to the fourth floor. His backcourt mate at Rutgers, Dick Stewart, became the associate head coach. Um, and I've never really told the story. This is the first time telling the story to like a mass audience, but he saw me down the hallway. Kelsey Williams leaving the team with personal problems. Dr. Brown did. You'll see it on the news in a couple of days. Go by and see Dick Stewart. So I did that. And when I said, "Hey, I'm here to be a watch," he said, "Your timing couldn't be more perfect." Like I just, it was a psychic, and he didn't know that I was talking to Dr. Brown.
Yeah.
So another player comes up. He says, "Hey, what's your name again?" I said, "Mike Barefoot." He said, "Take him over to Reynolds, introduce us to the guys." I worked out for a couple of months. And one day we had a reality lecture, and Coach V was known for being a comedian, and you see all the accolades he gets now. But he was from New York. So, four-letter words were not out of his vocabulary. And we did scrimmages for a couple of minutes. There were 20 of us. By the time I started, I was the only one. And, 2 months later, it mushroomed or ballooned up to 20. So the first 10 of us had a scrimmage for 5 minutes. I scored a couple of baskets, got a rebound, maybe had an assist. You don't even break a sweat when you're, decent shape like that. And then they said, "You sit down," and then the next 10 you get up. And then the grad assistant, while the players are stretching, because it was after October 15th when you can start doing it, he the grad assistant came over and said, "Hey, Coach V wants to have a reality lecture with you in the end zone of Reynolds." And I was like, "What is a reality lecture?"
Yeah.
So we get over there, and very quickly I find out. He said, "If any of you blanking guys think you're going to play in the blanking NBA, you're nothing but the equivalent of a blanking tackling dummy." And this went on for 30 minutes, and this was 3 times as long as us playing. And it went, and so I came home for the weekend and told my dad, "Wait, hey, so are you going back on Monday?" And I said, "Well, I figured I would." And he said, "Are you out of your blanking mind?" So I've been cussed that all morning, based on that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go back, and ended up running into Derek Whittenberg, who was one of the stars from the '83 national championship team later. And he saw me outside of a class at Harrelson and asked me what the hell happened to me. And he had stuck his neck, which you're not supposed to have contact with players. And I didn't want to say, hey, your boss who you idolized and played for was being, really tough on us. So left it, and he said, I said I have grades I need to work on, which wasn't totally the truth, but I didn't want to explain all that stuff. So
Yeah.
he said, "Are you telling me the truth?" And I said, and I remember sweat in November on my brow, just furrowing up, and he had his hands on his hips like a drill sergeant. And Terry Gannon said in the 30 for 30 special on ESPN that Derek Whittenberg's the toughest 6 footer you'll ever meet. So he's looking up at me, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, he waited for about 10 seconds, said, "You can go to class." And I said, phew. And I turned around. I remember sweat just pouring down my face as I was going to the other side of campus. And so for about 6 months, I was kind of rudderless and didn't have a direction. And that's when my friend said, "I want you to do karate." I met this guy that's really a little bit out there, but it's something. I said, "But I'm not getting into fights. And I'm not," he said, "But you got to do something." So he
Yeah.
taught me and because I'm so used to doing something that's regimented, the first 6 months, it didn't really click with me. And then I found there was another guy that taught on different days that taught a sparring class. And I've always liked competitive stuff. So sparring was kind of like an advanced game attack. Whoever hits first gets a point, and if you could connect. And he had a Saturday class. I started going to that. And that's when it started. I basically had two techniques, a back fist and a side kick. That's all I had. Started doing that, started clicking with me more, and that was in 1989, and it just stuck with me. And then in 2000, the person that left our school that I was working with on Saturdays, him and his cousin started a school, and they got involved with Bill Superfoot Wallace, who is one of the greatest kickboxers of all time, and arguably the best kicker in the world. We started working out with him, got as a school under one of his programs. And then in 2006, I started doing jujitsu because UFC got really big, MMA got big, and grappling started. So it just one thing led to another by accident. I didn't mean to go to grad school, didn't mean to get into basketball, didn't mean to get into but it all kind of
They all worked for you. And now I want to
right.
clarify about this basketball story. So it sounds like you go in there, okay, you're
Yep.
persistent. You're listening to
Yep.
the guy who's like on you. You go
Yep.
in there and you do it and you're playing well. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
this reality talk becomes just a cuss fest. You come home, you tell your dad about it, he's cussing too. And then and like, so wait a minute. Did you decide I don't want to go and be inspired by that kind of leadership
Well, here's the thing that's funny
and
that you
just not
mentioned.
go? Or was it a cuss fest and you guys suck and you're horrible, don't come back? Like,
No, I
which,
think it was
yeah,
it was a way to put you in your place and let you know, "Hey, we have Scott." And at that time, I counted later on, I looked back, and my son looked at it and he said, "Dad, did you know there were guys, 6 NBA guys on your roster that 6 of them played in the NBA?" I knew I wasn't taking their spots. And my dad even gave me his reality lecture, which was Chris Corchiani, which was the first guy in the NCAA to notch 1,000 assists in his career, and Rodney Monroe that ended up being the all-time leading scorer, and that mark still stands today at NC State. He said, "You're not taking their jobs." He said, "You're going to be the guy they roll out with 30 seconds to go in a 30-point blowout, and you'll be lucky if you get
ah, so
37."
you're going to
So
do all the work and end up being a bench warmer.
with no
And maybe that's
scholarship,
not how you want to spend your time.
right? And he was like, "The only thing that can suffer are your grades. Why would you go through all that and then go through the verbal barrage every day?" And
Correct.
I said, "Huh."
You chose your overall. See, this is the thing because the world could tell you, "Oh, why wouldn't you want to play for state? You should do it, even if you're just sitting there and you are that guy in the last 30 seconds." But yet you discerned, and through also listening to your dad, you're like, "Wait a minute, I don't think that's what I want to do. To spend all
Yeah,
that time chasing something else for somebody to just keep yelling at me that
yeah,
I'm not enough or something or whatever the case may be." And
right,
so you
right.
chose to direct your time elsewhere.
Well, and the thing was too, sometimes you have to have somebody like, we talk about guidance and, coaching people and giving, my dad did that for me in terms of giving me that reality lecture of his own in reverse,
Yeah,
saying, why would you take on something where you're not going to get that much? There's not that much juice for the squeeze. Meaning you're going to put
right.
in all this effort and work to say you're a member of this, but you're kind of a fringe member. It's like the Temptations are still touring, but it's not a lot of them aren't the original Temptations. But I get to say I was a member of the Temptations, but I wasn't making all the residual checks and the royalties off of these records. But I get to
Right.
tour with them and say I'm a Temptation, but that would have been kind of metaphor for it.
Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. But you also did that again, like later on when you realized, and people don't understand how it works on the recruiter side. They really don't
No,
understand. And
no,
there's all sorts of cuts and shifts of how the money gets um,
divided.
done when a placement is made, and it depends typically on the amount of work you do or the position that you have, and the lower
Mhm.
your position or the lower your amount of work, the less piece of the pie you get when it's time to eat.
Yes,
And you
yes,
decided, wait a minute, similar to this whole basketball thing, honestly, because I'm
yes,
like I love seeing patterns and helping people recognize that the
yes,
things that make you uniquely awesome in you have been there all along, right? So you're doing the
right.
regimented thing of basketball, you're loving it, you're finding enjoyment, that's cool. You try to do it as a sport for one of the greatest colleges programs of all time, and then you realize, wait a minute, I'm going to spend all my time doing that for a very little return on the investment of my time. Similarly, in recruiting for other people as a lower level recruiter, not
Yes.
having a full experience of dealing with hiring managers and candidates. If you only do one side or the other, you're getting less
And
pie. And you're
can
like,
I
and you still have to give pie to the people above you who own the business. And you're like, why would I give away my pie? If I'm going to do all that anyway, I want to be in control of my time and
and can I
what's the
interject? Can I interject
yeah,
one point?
yes.
That's interesting how things come full circle. So I own my staffing firm, and about 5, 6 years ago, we have a female. We used to work a lot with North Carolina Central. Speaking of HBCUs, how ironic that is. They were our biggest customer. We placed probably at least 100 people there. And
Wow.
we had a receptionist position, and there was a woman named Whittenberg. And I look at the resume because I'm sending her over for the job. The recruiter's sending me the resume. And she was, I think, VP, or I don't think she was president. I think Derek was. She was married to Derek Whittenberg. I figured that out because she was vice president of operations for the Derek Whittenberg Charitable Foundation. So this was the guy that saw me outside of Harrelson, was an assistant coach, and asked me, what the hell happened to you? And he doesn't know. And I haven't had the only time I'd ever had dealings with him was with, I got autographs from him as a kid. And then that one day when I see him outside of Harrelson, because you're not supposed to have contact with the
Right.
athletes till October 15th when it's official practice day. And then not only do I deal with him about why did I leave, but then I end up placing his wife X number of years later at North Carolina Central. So that's kind of a
It's
full
all small
circle.
world, right?
And they
Yeah.
need, and they probably, I'm sure they've never connected the dots. He doesn't know he doesn't know that he had talked because he didn't know my name. He just knew who I was.
Yeah.
And she ended up working technically for me and my company. And it's just funny how he was assistant coach that would have, if I'd have played, would have been in charge of me. And then I ended up being in charge and his wife working for me. So it's weird how that all comes full circle.
It is interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's okay. All right, so you start doing this karate related thing because your
Yep.
friend, now that's a pretty good friend too. That's like, is this the
Yeah.
same friend that wanted you to lift weights?
Yeah, 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 and got me
That's
actually helped get me a job at WKNC at NC State's radio station. I
oh
worked there for
wow.
2 years. Yeah, I did, news, which is how they start you out to work on your voice, your diction, and your articulation, work on all those, elements, so I did news, at the beginning, and then when the jocks or the disc jockeys go home for, which is weird to say that in this time and era, because now you've got Spotify and, Pandora and Sirius, you don't have as much of that. When they would go home for the summer, I'd pick up graveyard shifts, like Friday night from 12 to 3, or, whatever, when the disc jockeys went home. And then some of the upperclassmen would go on trips for spring break, and that was the same week as the women's ACC tournament. I ended up doing commentary for my freshman, sophomore year and they knew I knew basketball. So I did the commentary for my freshman and sophomore year because I had nothing going on.
That's
They said,
cool.
"You're going to be here for spring break, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We want you to do the ACC tournament for us because we don't want to be here. We got trips lined up." I was like, Okay. So I did the women's, which again, you think about doing that kind of stuff were great pathways. They didn't go to anywhere specific, but they were.
But it also it helped see, and I love this because it supported something that you were already interested in and passionate about,
Yeah,
basketball. It
sure.
supported your development of speaking in an engaging way, which yes, now you're trying to focus on that thing. But even in recruiting, we had very little time to make a connection with the person on the other end of the phone and get them
Yes.
to be really comfortable, or the Zoom now, but it was a lot of phone stuff.
Yeah.
To get them to be really comfortable to tell you stuff and for them to hear clearly when you're describing about what could possibly be and learning more about them. So it's just
And you also learned to make a quick assessment of whether they would be good for you to represent for a job, or whether they would make
correct.
you look good or bad, and whether you want to go forward with them or not go forward with that person.
That's and let's talk a little bit about that because this is also something people don't understand. If it's an external recruiter and they're taking an interest in you,
Yes.
that means something because
Yes.
what that external recruiter is doing is risking their time, effort, and energy to try to help you. Their intent is only to help you.
Right.
And so it's in your best interest. Now, if it's it's with a recruiter internal to a company, they also might want to help you.
Yes.
And if it's an external recruiter who's going to be risking their time, effort, and energy to try to help you along through a job process for their client, you do have to realize, yes, that their relationship is on, like my relationship was on the line, your relationship was on the line, more so than the candidate because we were
And they
going to be
don't realize
staying
that. A
with
lot of
that
times they think
client.
it's the other. They think they're the star of the show, and they don't realize we're the ones lifting the curtain. You know.
Correct.
The other
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
other side the other side of that is too, to go a little bit further. So for 4.5 years, I worked for an organization called Matrix Resources, which was the largest IT staffing company or firm in the Southeast. They just dominated when they were, they when they were in Raleigh before they sold, they were huge. And so I worked 4.5 years for them, commission only. So when I owned my company for 15 and a half years, I had to go out and, hunt it, catch it, kill it,
Yep.
skin it, cook it. And so a lot of people don't realize. So for 17 of my 27 years in staffing, if I didn't think you were viable, I had to make a quick decision. Is your effort and my time going to be worth it? Both of our
Correct.
efforts. Because if it's not, I'm not making money off of you. You can be the greatest person in the world. You could be a talk show host as far as your personality goes. But if you can't do the job, whether they're looking for a business analyst or a programmer or tester or whatever, or project manager, whatever it may be, a CISO, chief information security officer, whatever it may be, if you can't pull the job off, I may like you a lot, but I've got to decide that, and I rate you as an A candidate, a B candidate, a C candidate. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And you have to decide where they fit into your equation as far as being, placeability.
Or even if they could do the job, but their personality is just
Not a
caustic
fit.
and not gonna align with the culture of the company, we had to make
Yes.
decisions on that too. That's the thing that people don't understand is it's beyond the job description where decisions are made. It's beyond the resume where decisions are made.
Yes.
Your technical skills get you in the door, your personality, your possible culture fit with that team you're going to, and if that recruiter that you're talking to is actually really good and working hand in hand with that team, which a lot of really great recruiters are, then they know they have, like you're saying, oh, you remind me of this guy who I placed before, and you remind me of this guy, and they've had a really good, successful thing. We just tend to end up honing in on the personality traits beyond the resume that really help somebody thrive and succeed in that role. And that's what we want in any sort of staffing placement. We want that person to be fulfilled and happy in that new chapter that they're taking. And it's also helpful when they stay past the guarantee period and we actually get paid. That's also
And that's the difference too between being a good recruiter and a great recruiter. And the thing is seeing the long-term viability of it. Being
yeah,
able to see, does this just fit a need for now, or where do I see
right,
this person? Because I always say that the person you place could be the person that you eventually answer to in terms of that company growing and getting a
right,
job. And there have been people, like I had a guy that was unemployed out of Virginia that was applying for a senior director level role with a company. And he had been unemployed for well over 6 months. And he went through the third interview. And when he knew the offer was coming, he started making all these demands where he was going to work remote X number of days a week. And this was where remote was in vogue. He was going to
Yeah.
get a corner office. He wanted X amount of money for this. He wanted this kind of flexibility in this area. And I went to the CIO and I said I wouldn't hire him. And he knew, and this was a perm placement. You know about we talked
Yeah.
about that. And so I was going to make well into, I mean, owning the company, I was going to make 5 figures in this deal. And I've turned down over $100,000 worth of perm fees in my career. And I told the CIO, you don't need to hire this guy because he's going to be terrible for your organization in terms of the culture. And he said, Mike, let me think about it overnight and I'll get back with you. And he thought about it and he said, well, for one thing, we don't have a class structure in our organization. I take that out of the equation. He was ex-Navy and everybody was important. The lowest guy on the totem pole was as important as the highest guy. Everybody had a role. And he said, if I took somebody out of a corner office, that would mean that I made that person feel lesser than the person I'm hiring. And he said, "You're right." And he said, he just wanted to think about it. And he said, "That's the reason I work with you exclusively is because I don't know
Yeah.
anybody in Raleigh that would turn down a perm fee of the magnitude because it was 6 figures, and so it was
Yeah.
what we were getting was five." He said, "I don't know anybody that would turn down that kind of money." And I said, "Well, here's the problem. If I place him with you, eventually I'm probably going to have to work with him to fill other positions. I know it's not only going to be good for your organization, but it's going to be bad for my organization too. And it's going to leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth that I put him there. The first thought is going to be, who placed him here? You know,
Yeah.
where we
That's
get
right.
blamed."
And I turned down stuff too, and there were plenty of other people sitting near me that were very much about the thing right then that day, and I was like,
Instant
I
gratification. Yeah.
want to make the longer term thing. And some people's thoughts were, "Oh, well, if they leave, then we just get another placement." And I'm
Backfill.
like, "Oh my
Backfill. Yeah.
gosh, that this is," and I started having those feelings even more like, "I don't think this is the right environment for me anymore." And if that's
Yeah.
I'm like, and I used to say, you can play in your sandbox however you want to, but
Yep.
there's a time where I'm going to just get up and go find my own sand. Like
Yeah.
that's just
Well, that's what I did when my own organization
yeah.
because I was a good driver for revenue. So I would be called, or when the VP would come into town every 6 weeks or so, he'd always go out with the GM one night and he would take me out another night. And after this was going on for a couple of years, I finally asked him, I said, "Hey, why am why are you? I know you're supposed to take out the GM. Why are you asking me out there?" And he was blunt with me. He said, "Because you're the only one that'll tell me the damn truth." And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I get what I want to hear from everybody else. They tell me what I want to hear. You're the only one that'll really tell me what's going on. And sometimes you tell me what I don't want to hear, but you think it's what should be heard." And I go, "Well, I don't really have anything to if you don't go with my idea, what if I'm not a officer, I'm not a GM, I'm not, but you asked." And he said, "Well, that's the reason I have you go out every time with me." So he'd be there for 2 nights and 3 days, and he would go out with the GM one night, and he'd go out with me another night. And he'd ask, he said, "What do you think about this?" And I had a conversation with this person. They told me this, and and I would just give him my unabashed, real,
Yeah.
transparent opinion. And I finally was like, you know, it was just kind of, why am I doing this? Why am I going out with you? And finally, why do you always? It seems like I'm his sounding board, or he's throwing spaghetti against the wall and checking which meatballs stick. I'm wondering why he's bouncing things off of me. And he just finally told me I was the only one, giving him no filtered answers. And I said, okay. But I said, if you don't go with it, that's fine. And if you go with it, that's fine too. I mean, it's no skin off my nose either way.
That's the thing.
So
Just being authentic, being yourself, communicating clearly, transparently, and telling the truth. Like then you don't have to wonder what the story was because you know the
exactly.
story. It's the
And,
truth.
and and if it got traced up and am I going to be the one necessarily that they're going to say that came from my, no, I just would be the one that he was like taking to dinner, and that could be interpreted. I think he really gets along with Mike. Because nobody's there except for me and him for dinner. So
Yeah.
you don't know how much of that, but you can kind of trace and go, well, that must be the GM that told him that, or that must have been, I didn't really care what at the end of the day whether he took my idea or not because I wasn't getting paid extra for it. And I was actually trying to just do what was best for the office, not for me personally, not for me, but I was trying to say how because I was driving the revenue. I was, account executive when the Great Recession hit in 2008. when I first started, we had 5 practice groups with 27 people. We had engineering, aerospace engineering, healthcare, accounting, and then finally us with IT. And when everything, the economy went just through the floor, we were the only one standing because we were doing at least around $3 million of revenue a year through me. So they kept us and they got rid of the others. And we eventually added one person in accounting back when things started to stabilize. But there's a reason why all that left. And I think, again, I was being honest, transparent, having integrity, looking at the big picture and saying, I'm not going to make this placement just for instant gratification. I'm going to make this placement because it's good for them and it's good for us and building a
That's right.
long-term relationship, you know.
Now, I'm curious, when you were like your youngest version of yourself, what do you recall as like being what you thought success was? Like what you thought it meant to be a successful adult? What was that picture that you had at that time?
I thought it was, I came from a household where honesty and having integrity was always um really emphasized. So uh those were the two components I think that were the biggest in my wheelhouse of what was expected. My dad was always, and the reason I always say I was not a great student, I made good grades, good enough to get into state, but again, I was playing basketball so much. I would be the kid that did the term paper the night before and pull an A because I was good at writing and I was good at communicating. So as long as I made A's and B's, which is what I would do, but that's terrible when you're doing homework in front of the TV or you're studying the night before a quiz and you make a B in it, and your dad's not giving you any grief because you're able to pull a B. That's not because to get to college, it's the upper echelon, and I didn't really develop into a decent student until I got to graduate school. And I did well in the GMATs. I was not good at math at state, but that's a STEM school, science, technology, engineering, and math. So I was taking the same math because they were trying to save money at state that the engineers department would, because one out of every 3 students at state was an engineer. So they would use those maths to weed out. So instead of having separate math for us, they'd make us take the same math as the engineers. I'm thinking, why am I taking this level of calculus? Why am I,
Yeah.
along with a bunch of engineering math, and they're weeding these guys out, and I'm having to take it. So I actually did decently well, above average on the math portion. Did really well on the communications and English side, but I was still on probation in grad school. But again, I didn't develop into a decent student and that was because really the only reason that was because you couldn't make more than 2 C's and you had to graduate with at least a 3.0 average. So that's when I became a decent. So I've emphasized it to my son, and now he's an honor grad, honor in undergrad and high school, and all of the places he's been in community college, he was there as well. He's learned from my mistakes, and
Right.
I don't like to term things as mistakes or losses. I like to refer
Maybe
to
it's
them more as
lessons. He's learned from your lessons.
lessons, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It's lessons. So I try to say, hey, do I'm the one that has to talk him off the ledge and go, well, my GPA will only be. I go, hey, nobody's gonna really care about 10% of the equation, like you said, is just getting you in the door with your pedigree and where you went to school and what you graduated with. The 90% of it's what you do when you get there.
That's right.
You
And
know?
who knows you and likes you. Who
Yeah,
knows you and likes you. Because that's the thing. And somebody told me one time, like, what's the person who graduates with the worst grades in medical school called?
a
And I'm like,
doctor.
exactly. A doctor. You're like, dang,
Yeah,
dang. Wow,
yeah,
maybe I met them,
yeah.
compared to
And I
some of
probably
the
had a few of them work with me, in terms of,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm
and they're the
curious.
most rich doctors. So I mean,
Now,
so.
how about now? I'm really big on success and authentic success, and that's how you define it now. With all your um, learnings over time, like how do you define authentic success for yourself in this moment?
I think, and that's one of the things, success is different things to different people. One person's floor is another person's ceiling. I've had, mothers or housewives that say, my big concern is I have 2 small ones at home and I want to work within 10 or 15 minutes of where we live in case I have to go to school and pick them up or be at their beck and call or deal with them. So I'm willing to take a 10, 15, $20,000 pay decrease because that's what is important to me, is being a great mother to my kids. where you see a breadwinner or a father sometimes who perceive, and that role was more perceptive, 20 years ago than it is now, because you have women, 62% of the college population now are women. So they would be like, I want to make, that extra $20,000 per year, and I want, performance bonus, and I want remote work, and so I realize, success is individualistic. I could be wanting to have, and this is one of the things that I think drives me more now or motivates me more is success is, excelling with interpersonal relationships with people. How do I become a better partner to my significant other? How do I have a better relationship with my child? Um, how do I come across better as a person and not be individualistic as opposed to being giving as opposed to taking? And I still want to be successful. We all need to have certain success financially to be able to live. But I think once you reach a certain level, some of those priorities and definitions, I don't want to say become diluted, but they change.
Yes.
And and I've really learned to preach just not only through my own life, but seeing how people will make the almighty dollar their, deity. And it takes away because they're putting in the 60, 70-hour work weeks. And then you realize that they don't have time for their kids, their health suffers. We talked about that, and other aspects of their life go downhill, but they can still say, I made $175,000 last year. Well, that's great, but you don't spend any quality time with your kids or your wife, and you rarely go on vacation, and your cholesterol's through the roof, and you have all these other things that aren't working, but you can say you have this job title and you make this amount of money per year and you drive this type of car. Well, that's kind of a very, um, it's a very, it's like saran wrap around a new appliance. It looks good, but after a certain point, you got to take it, apart, and you got to start using it, and
Yeah.
if, it's going to get banged up and beat up if it's used too. And I just say that, you know, one person's floor is another person's ceiling. Just because you think it's success and it may be successful in your train of thought or your light doesn't mean it's totally successful, because everything in your life is like slivers of pie. Your health, your well-being, your emotional state, your psychological state, your interpersonal relationship with others. I think if you have balance and harmony in your life, you can use that and have a more successful 40-hour work week or 45-hour, and have the other parts of your life work, and that's going to overlap into your work life and make you more plugged in when you're there. And we've had studies that show that after 40 hours per week, productivity goes down significantly. So just because
Right.
you're putting in more hours, you may be getting stuff done, but you're getting it done at a much slower pace.
Right.
And it may be a sloppier set of work that you're putting out. So I'm all about balance and harmony, and realizing that if you have that in the different aspects of your life, that's going to translate to the work and some of the other things that have to get done, but other things that you need to feed your soul
Mm.
is going to
Mm.
make you be a more well-rounded person.
I love that. Now, it also reminded me of like back when we were first married and I was working, and then some, and writing my dissertation at the same time. My husband just kind of told me one time, he said, look, every now and then you got to just stop and like sharpen your knife. You're just
Yeah.
whittling and cutting things all the time. But like, just take a break, relax, go back to it another time with fresher eyes. And that's what you're saying too. Like, you can work long hours and you can work long and hard, but then you're going to be hardly working
Right.
in getting stuff actually done. Well,
Absolutely.
Mike, how do people, I know that you're moving into this speaking focus now and philanthropy and those kind of things. Let's say somebody's looking for a speaker and they could really value from some of the lessons and the things that you do. How do they go about finding you and learning more about how to make that work?
Right now, you can always reach me at my email address. I still have the work email intact, which is Mike B at redzoneresources.com. The other is you can always reach me. Well, I'll say two. The other one is LinkedIn. You can reach me on my LinkedIn account. It's Michael Barefoot, and through one of those two means, that can always start an initial conversation, and we can go and expand from there, just like we did. And and I think as we were talking about where you're at in your phase, you're a little bit ahead of me because you've been doing it longer. And so you have to kind of gradually, as you reach certain levels, then you go to the next step in terms of what you're willing to, bring into your stable as far as gaining traction. And that's what I'm trying to do at this point. So
Well, that's awesome. Well, I've enjoyed getting to know you. I look forward to continuing to meet up with you through NSA Carolinas and maybe even outside of that. I know we're going to be doing what we can to kind of collaborate and support each
absolutely.
other through this initiative. But thank you so much for all of your time today and for sharing more of your story. It's just really been an honor to be a part of it. So thank you so
Well,
much,
thank you
Mike.
so much. Thank you so much.
Mike, thank you. Thank you for the discipline you've brought to your work and for sharing the story behind it. Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sangal. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.